Hello.
Hi,
Hi, nice to see you.
nice to see you too, Charity.
For those of you who are joining us virtually this evening, my name is Charity Chan. I'm the Performing Arts Manager at the Aga Khan Museum, and it is with great pleasure that I am able to welcome Farnaz Ohadi here tonight, who is the mastermind, the curator, the composer, the creator, the director of the project The Road to Azadi.Libertad, which we are presenting this evening in a revised format for our virtual Duende Festival. The program was originally selected to be part of our annual Duende Festival programming, but due to COVID, we had to sort of reconfigure how we were going to present this project to you virtually. Before I continue and before I pass this over to Farnaz to give a little bit more introduction about the project, I do want to take a moment to acknowledge that the land and site that we are able to create and make art and music from, whether it's in Vancouver, which is where Farnaz is currently based, or here in Toronto, in Ontario, where the Aga Khan Museum is, has been a site for art and culture for millennia and has been stewarded and cared for and maintained through the efforts of many, many peoples and cultures. Most recently, the Anishinaabe, the Huron-Wendat, and the Mississaugas of the First Credit. So without further ado, Farnaz, would you be able to share with us a little bit more about the Road to Azadi-Libertad and the project we're about to watch?
Thank you. Yes, so it's a delight to be here. We were looking forward to being there in person. Unfortunately, that is not possible this year, but thank you to Aga Khan Museum and yourself, Charity, for facilitating this possibility for us to at least connect virtually. Azadi.Libertad has been a project that's been in the works for about a year. We had plans to go into the studio and to record in May, but unfortunately, because of COVID, we had to sort of settle for the live work that we did. It was an idea that, I've been working on my music, the fusion of Persian flamenco, basically Persian lyrics put to flamenco music for a very long time, over 10 years now. And it was a challenge to see if we could actually create music as a group, as a community. So we all went to a artist residency, and we spent a week there concentrating on this music, and this is the result of that. And it's been a beautiful journey, because from the where it all started to where we are now, it's been quite a journey, really, and a transition from how we approach the music to now and what's coming in 2021. I have another album actually in the works as well, so there's a lot going on. Yeah.
Wonderful. And so for this evening, you prepared for us a short documentary about 20, a little over 20 minutes, that documents the process and the creation and the ideas and inspiration behind the Road to Azadi-Libertad.
Yes, so the documentary explains, puts everything in context a little bit about what the concept of Persian flamenco is, why I actually was compelled to get into it, and also how things have changed over the last 10 years, from the very beginning, how one song took almost 2 years to really develop, to this particular journey towards Azadi.Libertad, which effectively took a week. I mean, there was a lot of work that went behind the scene, and we each considered the songs that we were going to bring together to explore. But it's been a monumental change over the 10 years, and I think I'm hoping that this documentary really highlights that change and that transition and the study period that it's taken. And obviously there's a lot more to study for the next 10 years at least, but it's been lovely for myself as well to sort of explore the transition and the journey. And this is what the documentary is about, really highlighting that journey and where we are today.
And it's actually really exciting because when you and I first spoke after COVID had happened, the first shutdown had taken place in both Vancouver and Toronto, and we were looking at when Duende would normally take place in November, and it didn't seem like it was going to be feasible to do an in-person performance, no matter how much we both really, really wanted to. And so it was interesting that in the course of our conversations over the summer, what came about was that this idea of presenting the backstory to your work into the project. And I'm not going to give away too much of it right now because we're about to watch something that will articulate it and display it much more succinctly and better and more articulately than I will. But I really do hope everybody who's watching at home tonight with us really enjoys this. Please stick around after the show. There will be a short post-show conversation between Farnaz and myself. So take care. Enjoy, everybody.
Thank you. Enjoy.
My name is Farnaz Ohadi. I'm a Persian flamenco artist based in Vancouver, Canada. Growing up, I was influenced by both flamenco music and traditional Persian music. My dad was very interested in flamenco music, and my mom was very interested in classical Persian music. And it didn't feel any different to me until I came to Canada. Years later, when I was looking to find my own authentic voice as an artist, I realized how much this combination of exposures really mattered. I realized that being exposed to these two completely different disciplines made this interest in me alive, that I wanted to find a voice that nodded to both disciplines and was a combination of both. When I was thinking about combining the two, it felt at once at odds and also felt very natural. I thought about how would the soft lyricism of Persian language would work in the dominant culture of rhythm in flamenco, and would they even be able to work together? And was this combination even worth it to explore, or should it be left alone because they both are completely established, beautiful genres of music? I have been involved in the flamenco community in Vancouver since 1998, started as a dancer and moved on to become a singer. In my path, as I was exploring flamenco, I came across many people who were instrumental in my exploration of the music and eventually in my ideas when I started thinking about adding Farsi lyrics to to flamenco music. One of the most important people that was instrumental in this path, in this journey, was Cassandra, her professional name, Cassandra Lachina, who was initially my flamenco teacher, and eventually we became colleagues through our explorations in dance and in music. When the commission for the first song came through Cassandra, the idea of creating an album wasn't even in my radar. I was just thinking of one song, exploring it, and just see where it goes. And the exploration and study of the first song took almost 2 years to complete, when I felt that it was good enough to present to her and for her to put a choreography to it and for us to actually mount it on a stage performance. It's interesting that now, by the time this song actually will be recorded in studio with a team of musicians, it will be more than 10 years. And it will be hopefully for an album that I'm working on for next year, November 2021.
My name is Cassandra Lee, and my flamenco stage name is Cassandra Lachina. And I'm a professional flamenco dancer here in Vancouver, BC, Canada. I think I'm pretty well known through the country as a flamenco dancer. And in terms of flamenco, there's many avenues that flamenco takes these days, from authentic traditional cuadro flamenco all the way to contemporary flamenco and all of the fusions.
That's someone that you admire and respect, and they're very good at what they do, lingers and stops and listens and decides, okay, maybe this is worth my time thinking about. And then you went beyond that, obviously, by what you did and all your classes. And you want to talk a little bit about that, of what motivated you to sort of not say no and think that, hey, I could support this and see where it might go?
Well, you know, we're all foreigners in flamenco. So here we are in Canada, all the different colors, all the ages of people trying to learn this thing called flamenco, but we're actually a whole ocean several countries and many cultures possibly away from the origins of flamenco. So even the origins of flamenco are very suspicious. So we know that flamenco originated in Andalusia in the 1700s, but its origins are actually very suspect. Many people think that flamenco comes from Indian roots. Many say Arabic roots, many say Moorish roots, and it has Jewish, Spanish, and Gypsy influence. So just from the origins of flamenco, it's very mixed already. And so here we are in Canada, all the way in Vancouver, BC, trying to the best of our ability with integrity, try to execute flamenco.
Yeah.
But honestly, if we were to maintain truth and maintain the integrity and essence of flamenco, in the end, it's a personal expression. So we can't say no. We can't say no to its fusions, and we can't say no to somebody who's actually expressing their authentic truth.
How do you see the trajectory if you were to kind of quantify it and talk about it?
It's actually more about you, Farnaz. To me, whether it's Persian, Persian flamenco fusion or not, it's actually the thought and the artistry and the authentic message behind. You have evolved over many, many years now, and it just changes based on the sophistication level has actually changed quite a bit from our first days trying out the
Interesting.
Persian flamenco sigiriya.
Yes.
All the way to the album The Bird Dance with the Soleá fusion in 10 compas. And it greatly evolves depending on who you're primarily working with. In addition to being the singer and songwriter, you're actually a visionary behind it. Now, without that vision, would I be compelled with the fusion? I'm not sure, but it's more like you have a very international, forward-thinking female women empowerment vision, which I think needs to be executed along with the music. And I think
there's many facets to it. That's true. There's like the storytelling behind it is not just about the technique or about the ideas of just combining the two sorts of music, which is in itself is one pillar that holds the concept together. But really the idea behind it.
My first album, Bird Dance, was published in 2016, about 6 years after the first song that I mentioned that I worked with Cassandra on. When the album was out there, at the beginning, I really felt that it was just a personal exploration of the idea, of the concept of a Persian flamenco music. It was also very personal. It was all about the stories of me growing up and experiences as an immigrant and a Persian woman wanting to sing and perform as an artist. But there was an enthusiasm that came along with it that frankly quite surprised me. I didn't think the reception would be so warm and enthusiastic, and it came from a lot of different people. The reception came from people from Spain who were very used to very traditional flamenco. It also came from my colleagues here in Canada and Iranians who were very interested in flamenco music. It made me pause and made me think, okay, perhaps this is something to linger on and think about and explore some more. Over the years, it has morphed into a passion, a path that I seem to really quite enjoy exploring. I'm not really sure what the final result is, but what's happening right now, I find extremely satisfying. My goal has always been to create a seamless conversation between Persian music, Farsi lyricism, and also flamenco rhythm and sensibility. And of course, that's achieved through a lot of different ways, through instruments that are having a conversation together musically, or through the language, where the accents fall. So they're true to the language and the poetry of the Farsi language, but also very true to the rhythm of flamenco. In the new album, Azadi.Libertad, I feel that I've gotten closer to succeeding in this goal. What's particularly remarkable to me personally about this album is that, as I mentioned, the first song took a very long time. First of all, to find the courage to put it out there and to allow myself, give myself permission to go there, but also just to really understand how the language, something so melodic, Farsi is very melodic, can sit on such a percussive rhythm such as flamenco. However, in this album, we spent a week together with a very special group of people. We went to an artistic residency on Galiano Island in BC. In that week, we explored and we went in with an open canvas and some ideas, having not much expectation of what will be coming out of that week. When the first song and first album basically took essentially 4 to 6 years to develop and publish, these songs took about a week to come out, and I believe that the results are quite remarkable, and I'm very proud of them. That's where the importance of co-creators come in, where people who are equally as brave or as naive or as imaginative as I feel that I am sometimes, they take your hand and we say, okay, let's go, let's see what we can do. And I do believe that the people that came with me to the residency made this album a reality. Every song has their signature on it. One of the challenges and the beauties of Mashregh Ensemble is that not everybody lives in Vancouver. That means the time that we spend together is quite precious. 2 of us are in Montreal, 2 are in Vancouver. Our producer is in Toronto. We have a dancer who lives in Vancouver, but we also work with a dancer who is in Spain. We also have a guitarist who now lives in Mexico. So residency felt very special. Each of the members that joined me on this path, Amir on his beautiful santour, and Josue on his guitar, Michael on his bass, who is not a flamenco bass player, but he came along anyway. And then there's Hanser, who is a Cuban percussionist, and myself, of course, and Sydney joined us as a dancer in this project. None of us are really pure flamenco artists, but we believed in the idea, and that's where what happened was quite magical. We all came with ideas. We spent some time together and we just explored and had conversations and played the music for each other. And a few of the ideas emerged and we clung to them, and each person, each member contributed musically and we explored. And then by the time the 7 days or 6 days were over, we had 7 songs. More than anything, I like to talk about the friendship that came out of the residency and the fact that we all believed that we found a way to have a conversation musically. We each came from a very different background and discipline, but the conversation was seamless because we were all listening. And I think that's really the beauty of fusion music. If you are listening, if you're able to be open, conversations that can happen can take you places that you would never imagine. When we came back to Vancouver, we decided to have a live presentation, more like, in the week that passed, we did this. And we had a workshop and we had a couple of presentations that we recorded. And we had every plan to come back in May to do a complete studio recording, to really explore the songs, to open them up. But obviously COVID happened. The plan was to develop these songs musically, add illustrations and videos to the background, and really develop them as a stage production in preparation for our tour in the fall, which will take us to Toronto, including Aga Khan Museum. So all the plans for the tour had to be placed on hold. We had discussed going to Mexico and Cuba. We had discussed going down to the States. We were going to go across Canada all the way to the eastern Canada, but obviously COVID had other plans for us. But if nothing else, flamenco marks people for being survivors and, willing to deal with hardship. And this was going to be our hardship. And I have used it as a blessing to focus on developing the other sides of this project, which was equally as strong and important in the storytelling, which was the visual sides of things. I invited Ramin Mahjouri to come and explore the project with me when we did the presentation. I've known of him, admired his work. I've known about his body of work and the way he morphs from one material to another and one idea and to another, and I really was eager to work with him. And I was delighted when he said yes.
My name is Ramin Mahjouri, and I do a number of things. Primarily, I'm a writer by trade, journalist, and then, as they say, running, jogging is mother of all sports. And I believe writing is mother of all arts. So from writing, then I sort of deviated to other forms of expression. When I first heard you, it was very different because I was expecting flamenco, and then I heard Moshiri, and then it dawned on me, it worked on me. And I remember vividly that I came out and I found you and I said, I don't know if you knew me at the time, or you knew of me probably. I didn't know you. So I came to you and I found you and I came to you and I said, Farnaz, now you're my new best friend. Because I enjoyed the music so much, and it was surprising. Spanish music, flamenco, and then hearing Persian poetry on that music, I really loved it. So I think that's the beginning of our friendship or connection.
Working with Ramin actually has been really interesting because I really admire the fact that he is very sensitive to lyrics. And if nothing else, this project has a lot to do with lyrics. It has a lot to do with Persian poetry in particular. And a lot of the times it's difficult to say what is more important, the flamenco rhythm or the words that I'm using, because I choose them extremely carefully. So working with him was very important because, as I said, he's a writer. Originally, in his heart, he's a writer, and he's very sensitive to lyrics. But also, I really like the fact that he was a multidisciplinary artist, and he will be open to combining ideas, to collages, to working with photography, with calligraphy, with color. So it allowed him a chance to explore just as I was exploring the music. So it seemed like a really good collaborative idea.
Collaboration has a totally different meaning. That means you say something, I say something, and then we do it together. And what I do is not together, it's just me doing it. So it was a new experience for me, and again, the credit goes to you, because while you provided the framework, guideline, and told me what you liked in what your vision was, you didn't enforce that vision into particulars. So you provided me with the vision, the framework, and you let me do my thing. So in that way, collaboration worked beautifully. Well, it was a great experience. I'm really happy.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I find creativity to be very elusive. Sometimes I could be spending hours and hours on the computer or my notebook writing songs or lyrics and try very hard to actually work on a piece of music with my book of poetry, or be listening to flamenco all day, and really nothing really sits properly. And then sometimes, truly out of nowhere, something appears, and that's magical. And it's happened so many times, I don't question it as much anymore, but it still surprises me. I felt that the work on this album particularly felt very magical, because my intentions going into the residency and working on this album and in this project wasn't quite really what came out. But what came out was even better, because I was open and I allowed inspiration to come from all kinds of different places, including the location we were at, the people that we were with, and just the flow of ideas. And more than anything, when you spend your time with people who are with you in your ideas and they support you wholeheartedly in their soul and in their ideas and in their thoughts, then truly there's nothing you can't do. I think the highlight of this project for me is camaraderie, which, as you know, a child of immigrant, first generation immigrant, it's everything when you find a new home.
Bravo! Ole! Congratulations, that was phenomenal. Oh my God.
Thank you. Thanks for watching with me. That was really fun for me to watch again.
I loved it. It was superb. It was exciting. From the opening moment, I really felt like the energy and the excitement and the passion that really went into this project. From yourself, from all of the artists involved. And I have to say, when I first learned about your work, I was always really curious of like, well, why this pairing? Why this blend? Where did it come from? How does it come out this way? And I really enjoyed having the chance to learn more about it from your own words, but also just from watching, right? It's sometimes I think when you go to see a single show, a single performance, the presentation is so crafted, it's so prepared, it's designed for 45 minutes, 60 minutes on a stage, and it's excellent. But I think sometimes the best kind of art leaves you with more questions at the end than when you first showed up with. And I remember after seeing you perform at Tirgan last year for Bird Dance, I had so many questions. And after watching this documentary with you, I have way more. I have a lot more.
Yeah. I think every good project definitely has massive thought process behind it. So to have the opportunity to unpack that a little bit through Aga Khan, it's been a wonderful privilege actually for myself too, just sort of look at the trajectory and where things have come from, and just slow down a little bit and really acknowledge where things have started, why they started, and how far we've come and how far perhaps the journey can continue still. So I'm very grateful to that because of that. Yeah, I'm very grateful to Aga Khan and to yourself for making this possible.
Well, thank you. It's I was just honored to be able to help facilitate. And it was, it's one of the things I found so striking was that when you were presenting this, it wasn't just about the road to Azadi.Libertad. It was about this. It was this project. It was really about the holistic process of you working as an artist, as a composer, as a performer. And so one of the things I wanted to speak with you about is that the length of the process that you're working with here, it sounds like there's a lot of different projects, all of them on the go on a regular basis, and they're large projects. So it sounds like there's a lot of overlap. Do they ever tend to affect one project affects the other or informs the other, or how do you even balance all of this?
Well, I'm actually coming from a background of a designer. So designers in technically, usually we are trained to think of many ongoing projects at the same time. We are, in fact, that's part of our training. I trained for 4 years as an interior designer. Mm-hmm. So that was initially how I was trained. But also I'm a mother of 3 boys and I have 2 animals. One of them is a puppy. So it's sort of, I have a lot going on at the same time. And honestly, it's difficult to concentrate on one thing because then project grows out of proportion. I find that having multiple projects that are somehow related.
We have to stop. There's something going on with your audio.
Okay.
Yeah. Are you wearing
fiddling?
Headphones? Oh yeah.
I am wearing headphones.
Yeah. Are you touching something or rubbing something?
Yes, I will stop. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So you can pick up from where you were, or I can restart.
I can do the answer again, or do you want to do the? Will you be able to cut and paste?
Yes, I can. I can cut and paste. Yeah. So why don't you just start with your answer right now, and we'll keep on going.
So I come from a designer's background. That means that I was trained as an interior designer for 4 years, and we are quite used to working on many projects and many deadlines ongoing at the same time in various stages. So I actually thrive on that. I find that deadlines really drive me, and working on one project at a time is difficult because it grows out of proportion very quickly. I'm also a mother of 3. I'm quite active in my motherhood, and I have 2 animals. One of them is a puppy. So it's a busy, busy life. And, I'm also married. We have extended family here who are aging. So I'm, taking care of those. So overall, I find the more projects I have, and they have a very direct timeline and a very clear deadline, I tend to get a lot more done. And you raised a good question that my artistic projects are in fact quite related. Like I work a lot. I think one of the things I want to highlight is that I approach it is not just about the music, it's about the story. So when you're writing a book, the research that goes into the writing, every chapter, every character development, every background that might not get into the book, but they're all part of the massive idea of the book. So if we approach each of these projects as a book, the research and the ideas and the connections are all remain the same. So it's almost like a series of books that I approach the music at. So the story is layered. It's the music, it's the people who are involved in the project, it's the illustrations and the graphics and the animation and the graphic design, and perhaps we were hoping to have a sculpture to accompany this project, or we were going to do a live presentation. So it's all part of a full package of an idea and a story. So, there's multiple aspects, and even though they look like they're not, but they're all related. So if you think of it that way, perhaps it's not as scattered or as widely distributed. They're all related, really, at least in my head, they're all related. So yeah.
It sounds like that as part of your creative process, you have like an ecosystem. It's like almost like a separate creative world, and that world is like butts up against, lies over top of your real life work and experiences, whether it's family, pets, other training that you have. And then but it also sounds like that when you work creatively, you really do create a whole new space. And within that world, within that ecosystem, that environment, you can pull from all these different threads to sort of inform each project depending on how it works.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think keeping the songs personal and grounded in my personal experience. Like the first album was all about growing up in Iran. The album that's coming next year is really about the second half of my life living as an immigrant in Canada. I've been here for now, my goodness, almost I arrived in 1990, so that makes it 30 years this year, this summer. So, it's really the second half of my life. So it is grounded in all of that. So in some ways, it is really one continuous project. It just manifests in different ways, in different forms. So overall, it makes a lot of sense to myself. Like, as I said, it's one big umbrella, but it has different, let's say, different strings attached from it, and it's hanging, and each of them has a little pocket of a project from it, but overall is under the same concept and idea. So
yeah. It's so, I was actually kind of curious, you mentioned your background as a designer, which I hadn't known previously, but it does remind me that when I first saw Bird Dance, and even as you're describing what you would have, the sculpture you would have liked to have for Azadi.Libertad, for a live presentation, the visual staging was beautiful. It was superb. There's graphic images, there's projections, there's staging, there are hanging bird cages. How much does the visual element affect how you pull together and produce these projects once they come to realization?
I think it actually about 50% of the project is the visuals. And it's because people react to music in different ways. Some people are very auditory, some people are very visual. I find that by telling the story in as many layers as you can add to the story becomes richer. Just like a really good movie, the soundtrack can really enhance the visuals, the choice of the actors, obviously the approach to the acting, and then the clothing, the setting, the locations. It's part of a big project, and it's not just about the story. You can have a really phenomenal story, but if everything else is flat, you can come out of the whole suspension of disbelief. If you can recognize your city in a movie that's supposed to be taking place on Mars, then it completely ruins the escapism. And for me, because I am trying to tell a story, I find that every aspect of it needs to be really thought about. Perhaps not controlled is not the right word, but thought about. So it's so it's part of the whole. So when you look at it, you are transported with me. And my approach is to come with me. We're going on this journey together. The choice of the songs that follow are very particular, that the story that follows. And I think you were there, and I speak in between the songs, outlining the next song. Why is this song here now? And why we're moving on to this song. So, in that journey, we talked about my childhood, moving on through the immigration movement, and then questioning as an artist, and then questioning spirituality because I came from a theologically based society, and then finding a footing here, dealing with immigration issues and depression. And then finally, at the very last song, it's the blossoming of possibility of an artist. I think that's where we left Bird Dance. And that's where the second album coming next year will pick up. It's sort of like the womanhood and the motherhood and, turbulences in the marriage. We've been married for over 30, for 28 years. So it's all of that is in the second album. And then again, it's also meticulously chosen what song comes next, what the story is. So it's really part of the package. You can't have a book without a beautiful cover. If it's an illustrated book, each illustration will add to the story, allows you to see yourself and go somewhere and transfer your psyche somewhere. And that's what my hope is, that 45 minutes, an hour is a transformative experience. So when you leave, you have things to think about and digest, and to really leave with an impact, as opposed to just like a lovely musical evening, which has its own merits, obviously, but just that's not how I operate. I tend to really go for the full, it's like, all in. All in, yes, yeah.
And one thing I actually found really striking in this documentary, and you articulate it so well, and we've had a chance to speak on it at least briefly before this, too, is just that how you sort of navigate the distinctions between fusion, right? Which, especially in something like music, can sometimes have negative connotations, or in some cases people are like, yes, absolutely, only fusion music all the time. But sometimes fusion can have, negative pejorative connotations, but also how you strike the balance between the difference between fusion, synthesizing a culture, or synthesis of cultures, right? Because you mentioned even just briefly now, immigrating to Canada, motherhood, changes, development as an artist, and then also just the filtration of identity, whether that's through animations or images, whether it's through staging, whether it's through the lyrics, which I know you spend enormous amounts of time and effort and work on?
Yeah, so thank you for asking that question, because honestly, that's what really kept me from spreading my wings the first couple of years. I would call it a fear. It was a fearful experience to think that I mentioned this in the documentary briefly as well. Am I even allowed to go there? Because I am obviously not born in Spain. I could claim ownership to Persian music, but what I'm doing is not Persian classical music either. So first, finding courage to say yes, as an expression, a personal expression, an authentic personal artistic expression, this is valid. And I think I had to really go back historically and look at the roots that flamenco came from. And I did notice, and I picked up that, the guitar comes from Iran and it's just morphed into what it is today. And obviously what flamenco is in its form and traditional, and also the modern expressions of flamenco right now, it is not what I do, and it is something that nobody can really do unless you're really born in that tradition and raised. But my hope is to not to imitate what they do. I also, I was really watching a lot of artists who were interested in flamenco, perhaps by 1 or 2 years of study, who were from Iran and wanted to explore the links, would always have a group of Persian musicians, usually a lovely singer with beautiful instrumentations, and a group of flamenco artists, usually with a really lovely singer, and side by side having a conversation, which, some amazing fusion art, concerts have come out that way, both Iranian and flamenco. There's, Anushka Kanchar did an entire series of flamenco exploration with her sitar. So my thing was that I'm just one artist, and for me, it was not enough to just explore the conversations. I wanted to be seamless. So it'd be difficult to really pull it apart and say, okay, well, where does the flamenco start? Where does the Persian pull away so the flamenco can speak? I want it to be one conversation, one thing together. So, we call it fusion because we have no other words for it. But to me, it is synthesis. Like it is very much one entity that I'm striving, at least. I don't know how successful I am. Some of the songs are a little bit more successful, perhaps. And I guess it also brings up the question of, how do I measure success in a song?
Mm-hmm.
And at the very beginning of this journey, the first 5-6 years, my measure of success was from people who came from Spain, and I was interested in introducing them to this concept and this idea, and they felt excited by it. They felt that this was a new expression of flamenco and the rhythm they could understand, but the words happened to be in another language. So, one of the most beautiful things has been that I was involved in a project, but I was invited to sing a couple of songs, and there was this wonderful celebrated artist who was supposed to actually join us for the tour in Aga Khan, because he was going to be there. That's to work with Carmen at Aga Khan Museum, and so we were going to have him to dance with us, and he asked me to sing the Persian version of Alegrias. And I was like, excuse me. And he's like, no, to me, that makes a lot more sense. You're more relaxed in it. Tell me what the words mean, and I want to dance to it. And that's what we did. And this was back in 7-8 years ago. And so, no, 7 or 6 years ago. So that to me was the ultimate success, thinking that here is, Emilio, that's his name, that he sort of put a stamp on. It's like, this music, this approach to flamenco is valid, and I want to dance to it. It's inspiring me. So then I felt, okay, so then that means that this person is reacting to it from a flamenco side, but also recognizing that there is a new expression. It's almost like, new expression and approach to flamenco, but it is, at the end of the day, a flamenco piece that he recognizes. He recognizes all the nuances that he can react to as a dancer. So, so to kind of go back to your original question, I don't feel any more worries, I guess, about appropriation of culture, of anything like that. I did have a lot of those questions, but conversations with my mentors were really helpful in validating that, yes, this is a valid journey. This is something that is very personal, and it's not for everyone, but for me, it's very satisfying. I find that it's really, truly, and honestly the most vulnerable and honest that I've ever been in my art. And I've done a lot of art. I've done design, I've done visual arts, I've done all kinds of things. And this, you know, I just can't stop. It feels almost obsessively satisfying. So there's a lot still to do. It's a lot still to accomplish and explore.
It feels, when you're saying this, like that, it feels so satisfying, it feels so honest. I feel even when you have your large productions, I feel a sense of intimacy with your work, right? And it really comes across, and I wonder if it's because there is that piece with the notion of integrity, of artistic integrity, right? When you say Emilio says, oh, and shameless plug here for those of you who are watching and are interested, Emilio and Carmen will be presenting a virtual production of their collaboration on Saturday, on November 28th. Please register in advance on the Aga Khan Museum website.
Dream team. Right
It is actually the dream
yes.
team.
Yeah.
But for this, I wanted to see, you know, because there's so much intimacy, because there's so much integrity, how do you go about shaping or encapsulating the different projects that you have? We talked about a little bit about how there's always a process of exchange or overlap between projects. But for example, Bird Dance took a very, very long time to come to fruition, whereas Rota Azadi.Libertad took still a substantial amount of time, but less time. So could you give me a little bit more insight into that?
I mean, part of it was insecurity. I'm okay to admit that, because I think, you know, as artists, it's okay to show to people who are considering taking that path on that there is insecurity in every artist, no matter how established you are. As I said, the fear that, you know, the permission, where does that permission come from? And also that this makes a lot of sense to me. Well, will it be able to connect with my audience? At the end of the day, you know, I cannot deny that I thrive on people's positive reactions, and people wanting to listen to it, because I'm not working in a bubble. I am trying to reach out and trying to tell a story. So people's reactions to it matters to me. So at the end of the day, you know, like it's, yeah, it was mostly that. I think more than anything, it's just kind of making sure that what I'm doing is authentic to me, and it makes a lot of sense to me. And yes, things take a long time, especially with bird dance. It took a long time, but at the end of the day, it was my personal story, you know. And I think, and I'm delighted to hear that you felt that intimacy, because the songs were very personal. The songs were, you know, they talked about dancing and you know, they talked about depression. They talked about difficulty of leaving behind the house where you've known all your life. They talk about religion and being forced into religion to practices. They talked about feeling trapped in a cage as a woman who's from Iran and is hearing no at every corner. So they were very, very personal topics. And, you know, yeah, it was presented in a really polished way, but it was important to me that it came across as it's just, you know, I'm a woman just talking here and having a conversation with you. And if that came across, that is so lovely to hear, Charity, because I think that is really my goal, is to be able to connect and tell that story. And if the story resonated with you, that makes me feel really good. And, you know, in comparison, Azadi was just a commentary on the time. It was a really difficult time socially and politically in Iran. You know, we spent a week in a bubble, but a lot was happening. The 45th president of the United States was poking a lot at Iran, and you know, there was a lot of tension, which eventually, unfortunately, resulted in the downing of the flight 752 of Ukraine, killing so many innocent people. And we came back from this bubble into this massive upheaval that was happening, and the depth of grief that was kind of coming out of that country, and then people in the world were affected by it. So I was sort of caught in this moment. If you take the bird dance as a book, and the new book that's, new album that's coming as another book, this was really almost like an article commentary on that particular time. And it talks about nostalgia, it talks about pain, it talks about women feeling shame, because there was also a massive movement towards arresting the women who were active as singers on social media. It was just a really turbulent beginning of 2020. I mean, this is a year that keeps on giving, but it certainly started as a really, really turbulent year for Iranians, especially. So that's what this project is. This is really a capture of that turbulence, and it's never going to go away.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's never this part of history, in Iranian history, the modern history, it's never going to go away. I hope that it will be still relevant a year from now. That it's just like, look what happened in 2020. There's a lot that happened. A lot of people got killed for no reason at all. So yeah, I don't know if I answered the question. I tend to get very emotional
No, I
and
think
carried away, but
you did. And also because it's, it's funny because when I was listening to you speak, I was thinking to myself, so much has been changed, um, so much has happened this year and years previous, but it's also, as you're speaking, a lot of this is that keeps a word that keeps on popping in my mind is about exchange, because to me exchange is about understanding. And when I listen to you speak, whether from about the personal experience of your journey as an artist, your journey to Canada as a Canadian, your journey to becoming or being a flamenco, I think about it as like this is always a process of exchange, and processes of exchange usually, frequently, sometimes, or in theory, always end up with, decisions or resolutions or changes or adaptations. And not to make light of what you've spoken about because they're very serious subjects, one of the things that I did find striking was when you first told me about your work, the emphasis was on the amount of care that you took in respecting both sort of like the core elements of flamenco and the core elements of Persian language, um, and how you were trying to find ways to present both of them together while maintaining their individual identities, if you will.
yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I'm not reinventing the wheel here, really. I don't want to replace one with the other. There is a analogy, a visual analogy that I sometimes say, that there is this highway of Persian classical music that is quite paved, and it's like 7 lanes, people are coming and going, similar to flamenco. Cars are coming and going, and it's established, it's been there for a long time, and it's beautiful, and every once in a while a new road, a new lane is added, and here's me in the middle, my own little shovel, kind of, doing my thing, and people are passing by and they're like, look at that crazy person doing their thing, and everyone's sort of like, oh yeah, that's good. So but I'm doing it anyway, taking my time, not being chased by anyone, not chasing anybody. I'm just carving my own path without really having any intention of destroying either of the beautiful highways. They have their own merits. They're quite established. They're artists who do phenomenal, groundbreaking works in either of those disciplines. I'm just trying to find out what makes sense for me. And I think really at the end of the day, it's because I have lived half my life in Iran and really the other half in Canada. And I don't necessarily think that the project like this could have survived or flourished the way it has had I lived in a different country than Canada. I think the openness of the Canadians as a cultural highlight, the fact that they're, when you bring something to them as an idea or a fusion or a combination of ideas, nobody says no. They're like, oh, interesting. And I really feel that. Like, a lot of times they're like, okay, tell me more. Like this curiosity, this idea that, okay, this could be something. Because it comes from the fact that Canada is such a young country, and it doesn't come from years and years and centuries of established norms. So there is really no rules to break because the rules have not really been established. So there is possibility for people to say, hey, what about this? And they're like, okay, let's have a look at it. And I make a joke of it, but truly and honestly, in my heart, I cannot emphasize how aware I am of where I live now, and the culture that has accepted, and the country that's accepted me as an immigrant girl coming here and has some ideas, and they're like, okay, let's see you make this happen. And one of the projects that's coming up that's going to be presented in December after Aga Khan is through the Consulate General in Atlanta, Georgia. And I had this conversation with the Honorable Kirk Duguid, is that when you come from a country that at every counter and every corner you try to do something and the first reaction is a no. It's like, well, what does that mean for our establishment? What does that mean for our society's norm? What does that mean with our traditions? So you're constantly hearing no, 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 no. And of course, on top of it, being a female, wanting to have something to say in a stage, you come to a country that is entirely about saying yes. And I get that I come from a privileged background. I get that I'm not First Nations. I get that my struggles are not at all like people who do struggle in Canada. But talking personally, when you come to a space that does everything to support you, that's how I feel, with the massive number of grants and museums like Aga Khan, the fact that Aga Khan comes from this Mali tradition and has thrived and has the support of the government to create beautiful projects like Duende, the fact that consulate generals in Atlanta are supporting me, I mean, it blows my mind. And I've lived here for 30 years and it's satisfying on a level that is impossible to really express. So it's phenomenal. And it's, when you think about it that way, I'm so blessed. I don't know what I was trying to say, but at the end of the day, I feel really blessed. And I think having a project like this speaks to that allowance, having the allowance to do something like this. And that comes from the fact that I live in Canada now. I'm supported by the Canadian cultural expression. So I get quite emotional talking about that because it's very true to me, you know.
I think it's important for the
Yeah.
passion to show. I think it's
Thank
very
you.
important to show.
Yeah.
And your enthusiasm and your care really comes across. I was going to say, one thing I did note is your ensemble, the Mashregh Ensemble, is ever evolving. It's predominantly and usually almost exclusively Canadians, but not exclusively Canadians. So I was going to speak with you a little bit about like what role does this ensemble play in your work? Is it
the ensemble? Yeah, that's thank you for asking that, because the ensemble has been evolving, and it's not necessarily by choice, but I find it's actually becoming a beautiful trend in a sense that every time, especially the main pillar is the guitarist, I would say, the flamenco guitarist, because the conversation is half carried by the guitarist, especially the flamenco side of things. I have sort of clung to certain collaborators like Amir Amiri on santour and Michael Rush, because they're very bold and brave in what their approach is to the music that I'm trying to sort of express. But the guitarists have gone through a little bit of transformation depending on who comes along and believes in the idea. They're like, okay, let's go. So right now I'm working with Josue. He lives in Mexico. I'm hopeful that we were supposed to actually meet in Vancouver again to record in May. And he has plans to move to Canada for about 4 or 5 months, which I'm really excited about. But for my other project that's in 2021, I'm working with Gaspar Rodriguez, which is in Spain. And I end up going to meet him before COVID for a week. And the songs are very different. And I think that's really the beauty of it, is the concept remains the same, but who the collaborators are brings out a different expression. Obviously, I'm the one that's the consistent side, but even because of the collaborators changing, the song's expression and the nuances change. And I find that really exciting. And I find, I don't have to work very hard to create new sounds, even though the framework remains the same as Persian flamenco. So I think that's part of it. And it's also, I like getting scared. Obviously, that's part of my MO, that I like getting scared. And working with a new artist, it's a bit scary because you have to explain and unpack everything and you don't know what they will produce. But I think that also came across a little bit in the documentary, that I work with new illustrators because and I allow them to express. And it is scary to hold back from directing and telling them do this, but you trust them and they produce their best. And then suddenly what's appearing is beyond anything that I could do. So it's the ultimate collaborative approach to making art, is that you trust what you do, but you also show them, you honor them, you honor their art and their expertise and their expression by trusting them. So what they bring to you is their best, and they're also scared and they're vulnerable and they're like, oh, do you like this? And then we'll listen, and then something beautiful will emerge. And I think that's what I really like, the fact that ensemble shifts and changes a little bit, because it always keeps us on our toes. And if nothing else, Charity, this flamencos really like improvising. So it's the ultimate improvisation, I guess, to sort of deal with new members every once in a while.
Well, even as you're speaking about fusion and synthesis of culture and filterings of identities, what I was thinking about is I was like, flamenco is a really, really apt art form for this, because it's inherently adaptable. It's inherently a hybrid. And improvisation, even with thorough composed pieces or projects, or fully staged performances, the idea of not knowing of encountering the unknown every time you come up onto the stage, every time you meet a new flamenco, every time you open your mouth to sing. It's like it's built in. It's built into the tradition.
It is. It really is part of the process. And flamenco is for the brave. It's coraje, you know, you have to have the cojones to deal with it. The fact that, you know, it might not work, but when it works, oh my God, when it works, it's magic, it's pure magic. And I just want to also point out that, you know, in this journey, in all the presentations, the tours that I've been on and different showcases that we went on, I've worked with a lot of different dancers. And each dancer shifts the music slightly because they want a longer 8 beat or the longer 12 beat so they can do their thing on it. And last year in Toronto, we were with Carmen. And Carmen is, bless her heart, the most courageous, wonderful improvisational dancer I've ever worked with. And she made things so scary and exciting because we could not really plan. We had our own framework, but we had to adjust to her. And she practiced with us, and every practice was different. So we went on stage thinking, okay, we'll do this. And we had, I think, 5 shows together. Each time was different. And that is truly what flamenco is about. So within the framework of Persian flamenco and the ideas that you know what you want to present, just that collaborator alone, by shifting and changing every time working with a new dancer, it reinvents the music. And I'm like, God, I mean, who can complain about that? That is like the ultimate beautiful thing that as an artist, that you're not used to your songs. Every time is a new expression. What more can I ask for, really? So, yeah.
So, and I feel like you and I could keep on talking forever.
Yeah, we could. Yeah, I love talking to you.
One of these days, it is going to be in person. It's going to be over a glass of wine, and once COVID is over, we're going to be it's going to be a completely different experience. But we are running a little bit low on time right now. So, as a final question, for the audience, what is, and you've kind of touched on it a little bit, what's the most fulfilling experience you have? You work for your work here as an artist. You work in a very niche field, as you mentioned, right? You're the person in the middle of the 2 roads with the shovel. So you work in this niche field of both flamenco and like something that's not quite flamenco and not quite Persian classical music, but it is still something truly unique and special. What's the most fulfilling element?
I would have to say connecting with the audience with what I'm trying to say sparks an understanding in the audience. And one of the things that I've noticed, which surprises me every time, it shouldn't because it's been happening every single time at every show, it's people crying. And I don't know how that comes across. You know, some people are Iranian, so they obviously understand the language. And people come to me afterwards and they're like bawling, and which makes me cry because then suddenly there is this beautiful human to human connection, which at the end of the day is really what my goal is, to be able to tell that story. And the ultimate goal for a storyteller is to have that story make an impact. So I think that's the most surprising and also the most fulfilling of all the things, to feel that I left an impact, I made an impact, and somebody grasped the story and they go from there. So that's been really wonderful. One of the beautiful things, part of the journey. So.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I look forward to seeing you in person another time.
Thank you, Charity. Love to you. Thank you for everyone for watching the documentary. I can't wait to make more music and hopefully meet everyone in person.
Absolutely. Take care.
Take care. Thank you.
Bye.